So what is this causal? What is this other causal matrix? Like, what is the thing that you believe that they're tapping into?
That's a good question. And I will say right away, I'm still tapping into it. Have you done psychedelics?
No, I have
No.
not. The
Have you
edibles
smoked
count.
cannabis? Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you've taken cannabis. Um, have you seen a different reality because of that? Have you seen beyond a certain veil where you're like, whoa, like even modern, or not modern, but like conventional ideas about what reality is, you take this plant and you're like, holy shit, that plant is talking to me.
Hmm.
You have you ever had a moment
Kind
even
of. I
similar?
mean, there was one time, a couple of times where I've been like, "How the fuck did I not see this?" Like, well, actually, that happens all the time. Where I get a properly new perspective on something. I'm like, oh, okay, that's how I need to think about it, or that's a good way to think about it. I had one
Okay.
time where I smoked a joint that had the, the weed had been in a bag that had mushrooms in it. So I started to get like hieroglyphics coming off the walls and had to take myself
Whoa.
outside for 10 minutes. Smoked a cigarette. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Don't freak out.
Yeah.
That's
So
a
the only
bit,
reason I bring
yeah.
that up, and who knows, maybe I do too many psychedelics. I don't even do them all the time. I have kids,
Hmm. I
but
just
in
don't feel I'm ready.
ceremonial settings. No, well, then don't. You're right if you feel. Those who say I'm feeling the calling, those are the ones who are ready. And that's not some reason to think that you're lesser than if you're not ready, because some people do not need it.
Hmm.
And some people it's not their specific gift. It's not the thing that will unlock their specific gifts.
Yeah.
So to get back to the causal matrix, I'm still tapping into it. I'm still coming to see it, but I don't fully understand it. The way that it's been explained is this causal matrix of something needs to happen in my exterior world in order to, there needs to be a prime mover that I can point to, and it needs to be reproducible in the collective so other people can validate that what I'm seeing is not just a machination of my own mind. So there's this idea that the only reality is the Newtonian. There's a prime mover and that moves something else, and that sets the whole universe in motion. But these other causal matrices are this idea that your lived experience is also co-creating what reality is. I won't get into the weeds of this. I'm not even going to pretend that I fully understand it, but the recent Nobel Prize winner disproved local reality. So I'm not
What
even
do you
going to
mean?
say.
What do you mean disproved local reality?
So this was on Annika. What is her name? Annika Patrick or Danica?
Danica Patrick.
Danica Patrick. Yeah, she had a podcast with this individual who was explaining this. That was just fantastic, and he was basically saying that disproving local reality means, in the most succinct way I could say it, is that when something is not being observed, it does not exist. That at least, however, it was shown by this Nobel laureate who then won the Nobel Prize, that our observation of a thing or an event or a phenomena is fundamental to it being real. And you cannot disassociate. So this is this. If you ever heard like a hippie say, "Oh, we're all one," it's all connected. It's all connected.
Mm-hmm.
It's true in this sense if we run through this line of logic, that when something is not being perceived by anything, and I don't know how far down the sentient rabbit hole we need to go. Does a bacteria living on it mean it's being observed? Does a cat observing it mean it's being observed? Does it have to be humans observing it? And also Rupert Sheldrake showed
You
that
can't prove. You can't measure that.
no,
Double
no,
slit
it's not.
experiment in it. Like you can't prove that
No, well, like
unless you can
that's my
ask the
first.
cat what they've seen, or ask the
Right,
amoeba. You can't
right,
because you'd have to
and
measure it. You know.
but I think what we're touching upon here is ask the cat, and the cat will give you their subjective, their relational, and their Newtonian causal explanation of it. You cannot disassociate one from another. So, like the thing that that I'm staying away from in this part of the topic is what happens to this desk when it's not being observed. It disappears. Does that mean everything falls? Everything that's on this desk? No, because none of that shit's being observed either. Rupert Sheldrake also showed that observation changes the nature of a thing, even when you film it, and no humans are looking at it yet. But this also goes into the quantum retrograde causality thing, where once it is observed, it doesn't matter. The whole idea of space-time is irrelevant on some scale of reality. So this is where you're talking to a filmmaker. You're not talking to a physicist. You're not talking to the Nobel Prize winner. I'm using this as an example to show that the causal matrices that, and so like, also so I can show your audience that I'm not trying to prove this as real. I'm showing what is resonating as a new emerging story. And what that is you cannot dissociate the reality of your inner lived experience with the outer experience completely. There may be differences, such as once I witness a thing, then my mind takes over and starts to twist it in how I remember it. But that's not the event. That's stored in my memory. That's not the event. That is there for me to recall it from a pattern of neurology and then bring it out at a new moment in time. So that's not the event. So what we witness, oftentimes you'll have heard, we'll witness a paradox in reality, but it won't blow our mind. We'll just pass it off as, oh, my mind's playing tricks on me. Mm-hmm. So we have these mundane ways of passing off things that would actually blow our mind if we drilled into it a little bit more. So I want to just, so I'm not just meandering into infinity, come back to the original question. The new causal matrices that I'm speaking of, I'm still coming to an understanding of, but what I really believe they are is the shared collective story that we are authoring together. The story, so many people think that a story is just make-believe. It's just something that you contrive. But this flies in the face of the fact that for us to string a story together, it has to come through us in some way. So in a way, through our felt sense of the story being alive in us, we somehow resonate that out in our words, in the story, and others put that into a framework and a context. That context is like mimetic engineering. Think of how a meme not only gives you information to consider, so it'll show you, I forget whose wedding. It might have been the royal family, but at some like royal wedding, there was Ghislaine Maxwell peeking her head out. And I think maybe the Clintons right next to it. That story says a ton right there. But the words you put above that is going to alter that. That's a story that you're adding to a picture. So there's the real thing that happened. Ghislaine was there with the Clintons. Okay. And then you're going to add a piece of the story to it. What does that do? Does that change the event? Does that change the reality of it? Or does it implant the way that part of reality sits inside your consciousness with these words? So you put some words at the top, and then that helps it root itself into the context of the story that you live by. If I'm to just make this simple, so we don't just keep rambling on about this, or I keep rambling on about this, story has so much more force and effect in the way that we tell ourselves the 4-minute mile is impossible until somebody does it. And now thousands of people have done it because one person did it. One person disproved it was wrong. And then that seeming brick wall where all the doctors said your knees will break, your heart will, explode, your lungs will collapse. And then none of that stuff is true if you don't believe it. And you also have at least some capacity to overcome that physical obstacle. That's what I think we're experiencing, is a collapsing of the story that told us we were something that we are not. I started twitching, probably telling me to stop rambling.
Yeah. So what is there any truth to the current story?
Yeah. All stories, they have their their reason for being there. Again, like it's a nuanced conversation because a lot of people try to use reductionist logic to parse it back out into their appropriate categories and remove the connectors between them. The old story is the only way that we got here. You know, it is the only way. And you could say, oh, well, it could have gone differently. Sure, it could have, but it didn't. This is the way that it went to get us here. So the old story, I think here's how I'll say it. The yin yang, the whole idea of everything has its counter. The light casts its own shadow, right? And so what we're talking about here is the original mover, the thing that moved this story into motion, also has its shadow, its effect that no one could have foreseen. And that effect is also what we have lived. Our ancestors lived it all the way up until now. We've lived this story, but we couldn't understand exactly where it was pushing us until now. And so it's been said that we're living in catastrophic and existential risk, a time where this is being thrust in our face. It's not just a story that there's existential risk happening. It's not just a story anymore. It's right in our face. But the beauty, the other side of that, it's not just a horror story. The other side of that is when the horrific aspect of that becomes so inevitable, we can't turn our eyes from it, there's no way we can ignore it anymore, then it, in a sense, unlocks the codes of our genes, as a manner of speaking, for us collectively to realize, okay, nobody, no billionaire, no government, no group, no one else is actually coming to our rescue. Nobody's doing a goddamn thing because everyone's still trying to maximize the old story, which is what put us into this place. So everyone's still trying to maximize, I'm better than you, I want this opportunity. It's not a collective thing. It's a win-lose metrics type of scenario. And in a sense, I don't even think we're done with that yet. We have a few more years of it getting worse. That's my personal opinion. We're going to see things get worse, and that's what's going to force it in our face that we must change, not somebody else, not some government. We're not here to tweet so often that hopefully the next president does what the world needs. We're going to have to come face to face with the fact that no president, not even Klaus Schwab, could stop what's actually happening if he had a change of heart. I don't believe that. And when the Klaus Schwabs and the Bilderbergs and the elite do come face to face with it, is probably going to be after the masses have come face to face with it.
Well,
it's going to become after. And I do think they're afraid of blood. They're afraid that they know that nobody buys their bullshit anymore.
They're afraid of their blood.
Well, that's what I mean. They're afraid of their blood on others' hands because they were the ones who maximized the old story latest. They're the latest to show up. They're the ones that are still doing it. So maybe there will be blood, you know? And in many ways, I think part of the story also has to be, how do we move forward into this next part of the story without looking for blood, without the need, the absolute necessity? I don't think we're going to eradicate it. I think people are still going to ask for blood, but some of us are going to have to set the example. How do we move into this new story? Not by forgiving other people and just turning the other cheek and letting them have their McMansions. I'm talking about, how do we move into this story without doing what every empire has done before us, and that is turn the previous rulers into the number one enemies and using them as an examples? Let's take their heads. So now me, the new ruler, can show you all the now new sheeple that I have your best interest in mind. And that just keeps the same old wheel of suffering and empire turning. There needs to be a difference this time. And if there isn't, if a new empire just steps in, if Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum get exactly what they want with no resistance, if we just bow down and allow them the world they're looking for, I think it's game over for them as well. It's game over for all of us. And what I'm looking for, is for people not to try and intellectualize what the new story must be, just like I did and like that mom did when she saw her child under that car. Know that the new story must be something revolutionary, not just a rebranding of the old Empire story.
Hey everyone, thanks for making it right the way to the end of the podcast. I love that you tuned in this long. Do me a favor, hit subscribe, because 80% of you bastards are not subscribing, but you're watching my videos. See you next time.